My name is Phumza Macanda, the Head of Communications at the National Treasury. This afternoon, we would like to introduce the Minister of Finance, Mr. Nhlanhla Nene. We also would like to welcome the business people that are here. Oh, I am. I withdraw my statement.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're all human, eh?
We would like to welcome the Minister of Finance, Mr. Pravin Gordhan. We'd like to welcome the business people that are here, and we also would like to welcome the members of media. Thank you very much for joining us. The Minister of Finance will make remarks, after which we shall take questions. Thank you. Yes, please, Minister.
Well, good afternoon to folks. Where is DG? Other control join us. Yeah, I've got that. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I see we've created a bit of excitement for you. But thank you very much for accepting our invitation to this press conference. I'm going to read a statement, emphasize a few things, and then be available for a few questions from yourselves. The introductions have been made, but let me thank the Governor and the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank for making themselves available. And to my new colleague, the Deputy Minister, Jonas, he says he's to my right politically, although I thought in the early 90s I educated him to be on my left, but I don't know what happened along the way. And of course, the hard-working DG of the National Treasury. I returned to a portfolio that was assigned to me for 5 years between 2009 and 2014, as you know. I've been associated in one way or another with the finance family for almost 2 decades, and I'm relatively familiar, as you would know, with the terrain that we have to work with and its many challenges. The facts about the developments that took place last week and the response of the financial markets are well known. Our currency fell, the stock market dropped by 2.94%, bond yields shot up by over 150 basis points. But at the same time, it's fascinating that when a Monday morning comes along, all those numbers have changed in a very positive sense, and we'll share some of those numbers with you in a moment. Our government is very acutely aware of the financial impact this has had on those who are invested in the economy. As President Zuma indicated, when a decision triggers developments such as we saw last week, a democratic government has a duty to listen and respond appropriately. I am therefore privileged to address you today. At least I'm not going to ask you whether you pay your rates and electricity bills and so on. Eh? Our humble appeal to fellow South Africans is to work with us to continue to build a resilient and inclusive economy and a better life for all South Africans in the context of a very challenging global emerging market and domestic economic environment. We understand that it is our duty, and I want to emphasize this, it is our duty to continuously earn the trust and confidence of the South African public. And we commit ourselves to doing just that. We're very aware of the fact that confidence and trust doesn't get handed to one on a platter. It is something that one has to earn and something that one has to sustain over a period of time. Our focus in the coming months will be to do, amongst other things, the following diligently. Firstly, we will stay the course of sound fiscal management. Our expenditure ceiling is sacrosanct. We can have extra expenditure only if we raise extra revenue. We will unreservedly continue our fiscal consolidation process, and we will stabilize our debt in the medium term. If needs be, we will accelerate this by either cutting spending or making selective changes to tax policy. Similarly, any revenue-raising opportunity will be considered very carefully to ensure that it does not damage growth or affect the poor negatively. In this regard, I want to be very clear. As a government, we will not cut pro-poor programs, growth-inducing programs, and investment in the economy. Instead, we will seek to increase investment by the 2017 budget. We are going to redouble our efforts to ensure efficiency of expenditure across the public service. New measures are being put in place to contribute to reducing corruption and enhancing transparency, and these will be complemented by stern enforcement by the relevant agencies. We have been clear that one of the risks of our fiscal framework is the financial state of state-owned entities or companies. Let me emphasize that any support to these companies will be done in a fiscally sustainable manner. As President Zuma said, and I quote, "No state-owned entity will dictate to government how it should be assisted, and nothing will be done that runs contrary to the fiscal prudence that our country is renowned for." Close quote. While many are in a strong financial position, that's these SOEs or SOCs, the performance of others has weakened. Work has therefore begun to develop a uniform legislative framework to regulate state-owned companies. We cannot avoid the necessity of wide-ranging reforms that will put them on a sustainable financial footing and where good governance is non-negotiable. Government is committed to strengthening the link between policy formulation, budgeting, implementation, and the monitoring of performance.
All right, we're still watching the reappointed Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan, who's currently briefing as soon as we establish it. Do stay with us.
Technology isn't all scary. There's also fun stuff like gaming.
Lots of women do play games, whether it's on their phones or their tablets.
Then there are Africans who are using new tools to make other people's lives much easier.
We typed the whole CV on a small, QWERTY Nokia phone.
For all these and other technology and social media news, join me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC News.
Born with malformation of the limbs, David lives his life to the fullest.
I got this. Let me try my own. Got on the bed, then start playing soccer in the streets, then like, do this.
He can play soccer, he reads and writes, he is even able to swim, a role model to his peers.
Look at the scripture. It doesn't say I'm a conqueror, it says I'm more than a conqueror.
Join your host Buleng Mulebati on Bupilong every Friday at 17:30.
We shall endeavor to protect the investment grade or investment rating of South Africa. Let me take this opportunity to sincerely thank my comrade and former colleague, Mr. Nhlanhla Nene, I'm not Nhlanhla Nene, for the great work he did in the past 18 months. And I wish him well in his future endeavors. Fellow South Africans, I know it is time to break for Christmas and the New Year, but some of us have work to do to make sure that 2016 is much better than 2015. Let us do so and get down to business in a cooperative and collaborative way. Thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you as the Minister of Finance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. We shall now take questions. We will take about 5 questions a round, And please identify yourself and the media house you represent before you ask your question. We shall start right at the back. Gentlemen. Yes.
Morning. Funeka Otoyana from Reuters News. Just a question about the former minister, Mr. Van Rooyen. Did he make any decisions with regard to SAA during his short tenure? Thanks.
Okay. Hajra.
Good afternoon. Hajra Marji from Power FM. Minister Gordhan, can we ask that you take us into your confidence regarding how and when you were approached to be the finance minister again? And shall we take it from your comment that sound
was the Q&A session there, Pravin Gordhan, the reappointed finance minister, addressing the media in Pretoria. We seem to have lost the link to that briefing, but when he does come back up, we will go through that link and reconnect with you. So just some of the remarks that the minister had made earlier on when that briefing starting about a minute ago. A bit of he spoke about the strong position Treasury is in and the fact that it is going to emphasize on the inclusive economy and working together. That was the theme that he's put forward. We'll give you a better understanding of what he said. Let's just hand back now. I believe we have established link with that Q&A session in Pretoria.
Hi, Minister. I'm Aviu Mtila from CNBC Africa. I just want to know how long can we expect you to hold the position in the finance position? Because it's been quite a rough one. So how long can we expect?
10 minutes from now.
Okay.
Okay, last question.
Hello, Minister. I'm Pauline van Wyk from Media 24. You said we have to...
All right, we still seem to be having a problem with that link in Pretoria. Just to give you a brief summary of what the minister had said in his opening remarks at that briefing, he spoke about the fact that the Treasury will focus on making sure that fiscal discipline would be its priority, saying that any extra expenditure would only be allowed once the good amount of revenue has been gained through the Treasury. He said that they are concentrating on stabilizing the debt. He referred to the revenue by saying that all avenues of actually receiving revenue into government would be carefully considered. He emphasized the fact that they will not cut any programs that are directed to the poor. They will not cut any programs that are directed to growth in the economy. The finance minister also emphasizing stern enforcement and fiscal discipline in the Treasury. And as we said, he is now taking a few questions from the media on his reappointment to the Treasury. But let's move on. We'll try and link in with Pretoria a little later on in the bulletin. As far as the markets are concerned, let's just quickly go on to and start with Asia globally. Most Asian stocks falling today as China's yuan hit a fresh 4.5-year low. This is plunging oil prices, added to investors' nervousness about riskier assets ahead of that expected US rate rise later this week. So those are the numbers. Japan's Nikkei tumbling to a 6-week low, ending 1.8% lower. Hong Kong's benchmark index falling for an 8th straight session to a more than a 2-month low. But it managed to erase much of its earlier losses after a strong rally in China's share markets helped offset the gloom in global markets. So the Hang Seng falling by 0.75%. The Shanghai stocks, though, jumping by more than 2% in their best session of the month. Stronger than expected November factory activity lifted sentiment. The Shanghai Composite Index ending 2.5% higher. Okay, the markets, we look at what the US did on Friday. Stocks closing sharply lower on Friday, with the S&P 500 ending its worst week since August, plunging crude oil prices, compounding investor nervousness on expectations for the first US interest rate hike in nearly a decade. That's potentially happening on Wednesday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average falling by 1.7%, the S&P 500 losing 1.9%, and the Nasdaq Composite dropping by 2.2%. All right, let's get more details now on what's happening and influencing both the local and global markets there. Nompu is at the JSC. The Minister of Finance currently briefing the media. We seem to have lost the link with him, Nompu, but much of what's been happening in that area of Treasury has had an impact on markets, hasn't it?
Thanks very much, Devon. Well, I obviously was just listening to what the Finance Minister was having to say and just checking to see whether the Rand has reacted. I do see it's firmed a few cents, so he's obviously saying the right things, but it hasn't really shifted that majorly. In terms of his announcement, the announcement of his becoming Finance Minister yesterday, that did prove very positive indeed. We've seen local equities and the bond markets come up very nicely. Bond yields have come down by about 100 basis points. That's 1 percentage point. And also equities are up very nicely. Your mining stocks are not doing so well, however, but your finance stocks came up by about 15% last week when the announcement was made that Nhlanhla was leaving office. Those came down by almost 20%, so a real rebound there. The Rand from over the weekend has come up by about 4.5%, so it's doing quite well vis-a-vis the dollar. So everything is looking positive for now. But one of the things that the minister said that I found quite interesting is that he realizes, or we realize, he spoke in the collective, that trust and confidence is not gained overnight. So there is an understanding and appreciation that what happened last week did create a lot of uncertainty and a lack of confidence, which was borne out in the currency and the sell-off of our capital assets here in South Africa. Let's take a look at what the indicators are telling us.
As you call it, I mean, the same applies to nuclear or NHI or SOCs that we've indicated already, that we will do that which is required to be done by government in a fiscally responsible way, and at the same time ensure that we reach our fiscal goals, i.e., fiscal consolidation over a period of time, which means you want to narrow the deficit over a period of time. You want to manage your debt. It sits at $1.8 trillion at the moment. Rands. At the moment. So I must revise my numbers, you see. We need to make sure that that debt is managed in the right kind of way as well. And if we want to do new things, then we might have to look at where do we cut in respect of the things that we are doing already, unless, as I said, we grow the revenue base. Now, we're not going to be in a slump or in an economic downturn all the time. I think as South Africans, we tend to be optimistic, and we should retain our optimism. And government, over time, and by the time the State of the Nation address is given by the President, will indicate further measures that we're going to take, both as government but also involving other stakeholders in society, in order to make sure that we reach the kind of goals that we have, begin to reach out to the 5% growth that the NDP talks about, start creating jobs for our young people and giving them hope, which is absolutely crucial as well. Thank you.
I should mention that we are joined in this press conference via video link by journalists in Cape Town. So I will take a few questions here, and then we will go to Cape Town for questions. Carte blanche.
Devi Sankri, Governor, carte blanche. Minister, did you set any terms and conditions for your reappointment to the ministry? And were you truly happy about coming back?
Ben said from ENCA. Minister Gordhan, you spoke about SOEs, some of them at least, being used as a toy whenever money is needed. Are you suggesting that this government has been, or this administration at least, has been guilty of this in recent times?
So I didn't get the last part.
Are you suggesting that this administration, at least, has been guilty of using SOEs as a toy in recent times, based on...
I'm not talking about the administration.
Are you talking about boards?
I'm talking about anybody who thinks that the state machinery is there merely for their own personal pockets.
Okay, next question.
I'm Khalang Bata from Bloomberg News. Minister, how will you reinforce investors' confidence in South Africa? We've seen the markets reacting quite negatively after last week's developments. And just another question, why do you think President Zuma picked you to come back as Finance Minister?
Antoinette Slabbert from MoneyWeb. Minister, quite a lot has changed at SARS since you left this portfolio. I'm referring to the so-called rogue unit. How are you going to approach this issue in your new capacity?
How am I going to approach, sorry?
How are you going to approach this whole issue of the rogue unit and what happened since you left around that issue?
Do you have questions from Cape Town?
Yes, we do. Paul?
Good day, Minister. Paul Vecchiato from Bloomberg. Minister, first of all, I know the questions we asked, but can you categorically tell us if Cabinet has approved the nuclear procurement process or not? If so, what's the next step? Secondly, you said you will meet with the SAA board early in the new year. But from my understanding, the deadline to conclude that deal is December the 21st. So surely you'll have to be meeting with him very soon. And then thirdly, are you going to be meeting with our financial sector, particularly the Johannesburg Stock Exchange and the banks, to give them some kind of briefing or hold discussions about the next steps? Thank you.
Linda?
Yes, Governor, I don't know whether you can let us know whether the special meeting that has been speculated about, whether you did plan it and whether it might still happen, whether you yourself are confident that confidence has been restored in the markets. And secondly, to Minister Gordhan, we understand that budgets allocations were not finalised for the first time since our democracy at the Cabinet meeting on Wednesday. Does this not compromise the budget process? Thank you.
Donald?
Donald Presley. I'm back. I've bounced back, as I said in my headline this morning about you. Minister, good to have you back. Could you quantify the sort of damage that this to-ing and froing has done in the last week? And do you think that the rand is going to get back to where it was 10 days ago?
Hi, Minister. Could you just, somebody asked you about whether there were strings attached.
I'm sorry, who is that speaking?
Janet Hurd, Media 24.
Okay.
Could you just elaborate in the conversation you had with the President? The question has already been asked whether he attached any strings to you moving over. Did you have any bottom line for him with regard to accepting the job? And if you can also relate this, if so, with you seem to be very concerned about the state parastatals being used as a toy. Could you expand on whether you had any requirements before you said yes to the job? Thanks.
Back to you, Pumza.
Thank you. We shall answer those questions and then we'll take the last one.
And perhaps look at some of the indicators to show what progress we've made over the last day. DG, you want to handle the budget allocations and the process we're going to follow. And what else? Don't worry, DM, the work is coming your way. Let's start.
Linda, I don't know where the speculation for a special MPC comes from. We announce in advance when we are going to hold the MPCs. And when this speculation came during the week, we made it clear that an MPC meeting is scheduled for January and that we will stick to the calendar of meetings for next year. From where we're sitting, we saw no purpose in calling a special MPC meeting. I think that when there is uncertainty and panic, it's important for policymakers to bring a semblance of sanity to the market. And historically, we have not toyed around with the calling of of special MPC. The exception was 2008. But even then, it was not that there was a special MPC that was called. It was rather that the frequency of the MPC meetings was increased because of the global uncertainty in the aftermath of the global financial crisis. I think that care must also be exercised in analyzing the impact of the events of the recent while. Firstly, we must understand that this thing took place at a time that you have got very thin liquidity in the markets, both in the foreign exchange markets, in the bond markets, and in the equities markets. We must accept that lots of South Africans, including the traders, would have naturally been on holiday. So any reactions from the financial markets then gets pronounced because of that lack of liquidity. We did see adjustments that were taking place in the forex markets, and we saw the JSE wipe off some 169 billion rands from market capitalization. We saw the bond market wiping some 52 billion rands worth of market capitalization. And one thing is that prices continued to be quoted in the market. The market continued to trade, which is testimony to our deep and liquid financial markets, that they could withstand a shock of this magnitude. Since the announcement of the appointment of the minister here, we had seen a recovery both in the foreign exchange markets and in the equities market. I think that more importantly is that the index that we had watched very closely, which is the banking index, recovered, and that the losses now from, at the last time I checked, now only amount to 3% from the last time that we saw an adjustment in that index. I think that the index was up 15% today, but even still, it was mainly recouping the losses that we had seen in the previous week. Any outlook then for the currency in that period? I think that besides the lack of liquidity during this period, or rather the fact that you have got thin liquidity during December, there is this other event that is taking place across the Atlantic, which would also have an impact not just on the rand, but it would lead to a realignment of exchange rates globally. I'm referring to the meeting of the FOMC that is to take place during the course of this week. It is going to affect exchange rates and the realignment thereof on a global basis.
Yeah, good.
Thank you very much. Now, on the budget process, I mean, our budget process is very well established, as most of you would be familiar with it. Several of the major decisions have already been taken. For an example, at a meeting sometime in October, I think, I know, Cabinet decided the fiscal framework, which was published in the medium-term budget policy statement, also decided how the nationally raised revenue would be shared between the three spheres of government, so that each one of those spheres can go ahead and budget properly. What we then do as the National Treasury is that once the pot of the resources that are going to be allocated to the national sphere is known, and we have gone to a committee of ministers in which Minister Gordhan sat in his previous capacity, the recent previous capacity, in other words, Minister of COGTA, we then go to that committee and indicate to them a proposed set of allocations for national departments. As you know, because we are on a 3-year rolling budget framework, departments are not totally in the dark about what they are likely to get as resources in each one of the years. Certainly in the first 2 years of the MTF. Yes, there can be changes at the margin in that regard. So they were then national departments, that is, were given preliminary allocation letters so that they can proceed with the business of cutting the cake amongst the various programs that each one of those departments are responsible for. At the same time, begin to write up their chapters that get published in February in the estimates of national expenditure. So that process is proceeding very well. The only thing that departments don't know at this stage, which is a delay compared to other years, is just whether they are getting exactly the allocations that were set out in those preliminary allocation letters. And the changes we would anticipate in most cases would be marginal. There may be one or two cases where they may be material, but of course, not to such an extent that February will not happen as it has always happened. February will happen. So if you're worried that you may not have a chance to write any stories in that week, now relax, don't consume too much pressure tablets or Valium. You will be fine. Thank you very much.
Even as an old pharmacist, I have to say that we have moved beyond Valium now. You should ask some of them. They'll give you the new names. DM?
On the SARS question, I think there's a lot of work, I think, and progress that have been made in this regard. And I think the term rogue unit has, I think, gained currency in the media. Essentially, what we're talking about is an investigating unit in SARS. And what has happened is that we've looked in depth at its operation and started to map out a new framework for its operation. And that work is far advanced. And I must also add, I think, is that our primary focus is stabilizing SARS and ensuring that we sustain its image so that it focuses on its primary function, which is revenue collection. And actually, the unit, any revenue agency will always have investigative capacity. And how do you structure that, and how do you ensure that it is capable enough to perform that function? That work is far advanced, and we are almost at concluding that process now.
Somebody has given me some numbers which the governor might have mentioned. Equity markets have retraced about 75% of their losses. Currency markets retraced about 50% of their losses. So government's decisions over the last weekend have certainly helped to begin the process of building and reinforcing confidence. The Bloomberg questions, several of you asked about terms and conditions. How many of you, by the way, when you get employed, set terms and conditions with your employer? And say, really? 3. That's about 6% of this audience. Okay, the way life works in government is the president has, of course, as you know, the prerogative to appoint ministers. He calls a minister in either to say, thank you very much for your service, or he calls the person in to say, I want to give you a new job, and here's my reasoning for that. And you will understand that the rest of the conversation is obviously a confidential conversation between employer and employee, so to speak. So please respect that. How do we hope to restore confidence? By doing the right things. I think we've said to you very clearly what our programs are and what our focus areas will be, which I will repeat at the end just to remind you once again. It's about fiscal consolidation. It's about managing the debt. It's about making sure that pro-poor programs are not compromised. It's about state-owned entities doing the right things and being governed in the right way and looking after their finances so that they don't increase the burden on the state. It's about ensuring that financial stability is restored and the framework for financial regulation is modernized in terms of the new legislation that is actually before Parliament. And above all, private sector, NGO sector, government sector, and private individuals need to contribute to inclusive growth. So we need to create a climate of dynamism, of enthusiasm, of hope, of optimism, and action. which will take South Africa's economy forward. Government is not the only determinant. It's an important determinant, but not the only determinant. But where I certainly will concede is that we have an important responsibility to create the conditions which will create confidence in investors, both local and overseas. And we've given you the assurance that we will work hard at it. I was asked, why did he pick me? Can I refer you to the government's, to the president's spokespersons? They can answer that question for you. Then there was a question of Paul from your side. SAA, will it? I didn't say I'll meet the board only next year. I said I will talk to the chair telephonically in the next 24 hours. Obviously, the previous minister's decisions stand until there's a necessity to change it for any reason. So I'm walking into a new job, but there are old decisions that have in fact been taken. So unless somebody has a new case to put to me, that decision stands. But let me interact with the chairperson of the board and others who might be interested. Because at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, South African Airways is an important flagship for South Africa. It plays an important role in our economy to bring tourists here, to take South Africans where they want to go, and play an important role on the African continent. It's a vital national asset that we need to look after. And we will contribute to whatever we can. What you should also know is that there's a clear understanding between the President and the Ministry that once we've stabilized SAA, it must go back to its home, wherever its home is, as the President may decide. Treasuries don't run airlines. So our job is to stabilize the financial situation, and then the President will decide which minister's responsibility it is to manage the stakeholder relationship between government and SAA itself. On the nuclear question, I said very clearly earlier on that there is, I think, a decision on Wednesday that we're going to move in the direction. Part of that decision, I think, I wasn't there, I wasn't well, is that there will be a formal procurement process in accordance with South African law. And as I said earlier on, we will only do things, whether it's nuclear, whether it's anything else, that is affordable. We can't spend money that we don't have. And we can't make commitments when we know we're not going to get the money that is required to be spent in this particular regard as well. I think the Governor has addressed the rest of the questions. So how much more? Oh, no, hold on. There was Janet Heard, conversation with the President, bottom line, which I've covered. Yeah. Thank you.
There was my question, Minister. Are you truly happy about coming back?
You know, my job is not to be happy. My job is to serve you as a South African public and to do so with enthusiasm. So I have an excellent team, as you can see around me, and it's a great pleasure to be able to serve in this role. I was having fun on the local government side, I must admit, because there you make a very direct difference to people's lives. If water is reticulated well, thousands of people benefit. If pipelines are not stolen or damaged, or equally, tens of thousands of people benefit. So there is a real opportunity to make substantial differences in people's day-to-day lives, which I'm sure all of you are actually committed to. But I'm happy to serve you. Thank you.
One
questions in Cape Town, Chair?
Questions? Okay, one more question from Cape Town.
Follow-up to Linda and Paul.
Hi, Minister. Paul from Bloomberg again.
Hey, Linda.
Oh, sorry.
Ladies first, Paul.
Sorry, Minister. There's been a lot of speculation about the removal of your DG. Do you want him to say, have you got full confidence in him? Will his contract be renewed in May? Thanks.
What do you want me to sign to express my full confidence? I have absolute confidence in him.
Paul?
And he's a very, very loyal public servant. How many years have you been in town? 20 years. Close to 20 years. You don't take that kind of public service lightly. With his skills, he could have had a huge bank balance outside. And South Africa should be very appreciative that there are people like him who are willing to serve.
Second question in Cape Town.
Minister Paul from Bloomberg again. Just quickly, clarity. You said the decision on SA, the decision of the previous minister stands. Which minister exactly are you talking about, Mr. Nene or Mr. Van Rooyen? Thank you.
Now, Paul, how many bottles of red wine did you have before you came? No, the only minister who had an opportunity to make decisions is Minister Nene.
Okay, one last round of questions here. Helmo, and let's make it brief, ladies and gentlemen. Helmo and then Andrew.
Helmo Preuss, the BRICS Post. Minister, on the 9th of October, the Treasury said that they had appointed lead managers for a foreign bond. Can you explain what's the delay, and are we likely to see one before the end of this year or not? Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Andrew England with the Financial Times. Given that you're the first government official to speak on this issue, can you explain why one of the world's leading emerging markets got to this stage where a respected finance minister was replaced, a relatively unknown official with no previous national government experience was put in his place, and then 4 days later yourself is put back in that position? Obviously the markets are looking at this and saying, what's going on in South Africa? Can you just explain what is going on in South Africa? Thank you.
Well, Andrew, you addressed me as minister, isn't it? I'm not the president. So I'm afraid.
But there's been no communication from the government, sir. I mean, that's.
No, there've been a few statements over the weekend, and the last statement was at 9:30 or so last night, which explains clearly that the president, after many representations were made to him, reflected upon those representations, is very mindful that we are a democracy, and that's repeated in our statement as well, and that there are times when you have to admit that there was a miscalculation, there needs to be a review of a decision, and we need to move on to a new scenario. And regrettably, I represent the new scenario.
More questions?
Helmut, you want to answer?
Yeah, let me. He's complaining, even raising two hands now. Helmut, what we do, is it working this thing? Yeah, it is working. What we have done over several years, and thanks to the governor and those who came before me in different roles, by the way, because he and I succeeded each other in 2 roles in the Treasury, is that we do routinely 2 road shows a year, and we are very clear in the last 4 or 5 years, we don't normally do a road show necessarily to place a bond. We just do the updates, and then we look for the right time in the market to place a bond. This has been made particularly convenient for us recently because the market is very much aware of the South African credit, so we don't have to necessarily strike whilst they remember what we've told them. They follow the story very well and so on. Now, but also added to that is the fact that we keep cash in foreign currency assisted by the SAB, so that if market conditions at any stage are such that we don't think we would get the best deal at any given time, we don't have the pressure because foreign currency denominated spending commitments are falling due before we've placed the bond. So we've got the flexibility, and as we keep explaining this, we will at the right time raise the money, and we pre-funded last year, we placed the bond, and then we did the sukuk. So we are okay. There is no other reason other than the fact that we want to make sure that we get the best deal at the right time.
Okay, last 2 questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Nzakis Mashanganye from Business Day. Minister, will you be able to say no if someone approaches you to spend money you do not have? And secondly, can the country, South Africans, be confident in you that you will be walking the talk? Thank you.
That's a strange question, because I've walked the talk 5 years, for 5 years before. So if you want to talk about cost cutting, go to the October 2013 MTBPS and the announcements made there. Memories are short in South Africa, particularly it seems with journalists because of the pressure of information. I've got to find some excuse for you. So many of the things we're talking about today were initiated in those 5 years, where we had to spend in the initial years so that we don't impose what is now called austerity in Europe on South Africans, because we had the space to do so. We then started a process of fiscal consolidation then, again without hurting ourselves. We then said, hey, the economy is still not bouncing back like some other economies in the world. We now need to constrain expenditure in government. And the cost-cutting measures started there. I think Minister Nene has taken it a step forward, and we will have to take it yet another step forward. Unless we start growing the economy, and unless we start creating more jobs, and unless we start getting more revenue. Those are the prerequisites for us to spend on any other basis. And we have to then prove our credibility, as we have learned last year, to those that lend us money, to prove to them that we are worthy creditors, and that South Africa can be trusted to pay its money back.
Ben said from the ENCA again. As things stand from where you see it, Minister...
Sorry, we cannot hear you, sorry.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Ben said from the ENCA again. As things stand at the moment, Minister, with where we are sitting from a financial point of view, can South Africa right now commit to spending hundreds of billions of rands on nuclear energy?
No, Ben, I can understand, that you have a particular focus, but hear me, just hear me, without being clouded by your own anticipation. Otherwise, we'll never be able to communicate with one another. It's in the statement, it's in a written form, so I can't say anything but that. I've said very clearly, and this we've said during my first term of office. This has been said by Minister Nene subsequently as well, and that is that we will act in a fiscally responsible way, that we will only spend money we have, and we will spend money as we get more. So the question is, how do we get more? And the only way you get more is the way I've spelled out. Grow the economy, grow the revenue base, block loopholes in the tax system, or raise your taxes. No, but those are in fact all the options. So we can't spend money we don't have. We also say in the statement that making sure that we manage the 1.8 trillion rands of debt is an important objective for us as part of our overall fiscal management. And if that doesn't allow us to do X or Y or Z, then it will have to wait. So we're not saying we can throw it out necessarily. It's like, I'm sure all of you have demands from family members and others. I want A, B, and C for Christmas. And you're going to say, my boss, and I'm sure there's many that you have, haven't quite given you the bonus you thought you'd get, which I'm sure is the case, right? And therefore, A and B you can get now, but C maybe in April, right? So I think these are very pragmatic things. There's nothing ideological or sophisticated about this. It's very pragmatic. You got the money, you spend it, or when you get the money, then you think about spending it. It's a simple proposition. So let me say two things in conclusion. The one is something the governor reminded me of. I should have remembered it myself. And that is that payment on our debt, if you look at Chapter 13 of the Constitution, is the first item that you take off our revenue. In other words, before you spend any money in a new financial year, and throughout that financial year, you have to pay your debt obligations first, and everything else follows later. The second is to reinforce that South Africa, as the statement says, has a solid history of sound macroeconomic policy management. Since the dawn of democracy, our government has advanced policies that are meant to address inequality, reduce poverty, and unemployment. And those are the twin challenges that we are very determined as a government to continue to pursue. So thank you very much for being with us today.
I'm sorry, Minister, there is just one last question that we jumped. Just one last question.
Good day, Minister. My name is Mpho from Sowetan. Minister, I think in September the KPMG, report that was procured by SARS, basically it recommended that you be investigated for your alleged role in the creation of the SARS spy unit. And so I just wanted to find out, in terms of that investigation, are you going to play any role? Because I think there might be perceived conflict of interest in that. So I just wanted to find out your role in that going forward. Thank you.
Deputy Minister will answer that. But let me say something to you. This allegations that have no foundation based on leaked documents that even I haven't seen. Right? So tell me, how would you like to be accused of something on the basis of a document that hasn't been put to you, or a basis of questions that haven't been put to you, on the basis of no opportunity being given to you to say what the facts of the matter are? So one thing I would like to request to you as objective journalists is stop reporting on rumors and cooking up things. Where is this mysterious report? And KPMG's got a cheek to say he doesn't know anything about it, according to what I read, but he should have known. Wow. I thought forensic people are supposed to come up with facts. What does it say about the reputation of KPMG? But he can answer.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. Can I say a couple of things? I mean, probably two things. The first is that the KPMG report remains a draft. There is no final report. And there is a process of responding to all the issues that they have raised, both in terms of the content and the structure of the report and what to do with the report in any case. That process is going on. Until that process is finalized and there's a sign-off by both the client, which is SARS, and Treasury, we can actually have a final report. That's in the first instance. The second part is that the report, as we understand it from Treasury perspective, was designed to look at the institutional capability of SARS and to actually pick up all the problems areas within SARS and try to make propositions on strengthening those. And that's ultimately what will be reflected in the final report. And that we have not reached that stage, unfortunately. Thanks.
Thank you.
Let me add something. You know, many of you might not have been around in the 2000s in your current capacities, let me put it that way. But building an institution like SARS and building public confidence in an institution like SARS and completely changing the tax compliance culture in South Africa, which in the late 90s used to be celebrated at brides. What did you do to duck tax this year? Right? To one who said, I think it's my national duty to pay tax. Took a huge effort on the part of 14,000 people and millions of South Africans who placed their confidence in the system, and led by Minister Manuel at the time. Now, one of the things South Africans shouldn't be too gleeful about and should be worried about is when a crucial institution like a tax administration is going to be damaged reputationally or institutionally. There's many books available at your local bookshop which indicate the absolute importance of building sound democratic institutions. Don't play with state institutions, because at the end of the day, it's not the current generation that suffers only. In an institution like SARS or Treasury or the Reserve Bank or other similar institutions, you affect generations to come. You affect generations to come. We are in a position today to pay social grants that we do because of the fiscal space that was created both by the growth in the economy and the change in tax administration and tax compliance in the 2000s. Go back to that period. Took a lot of hard work to get there. So we should all collectively defend the integrity of these institutions and be very careful about spreading unsubstantiated rumors. Thank you.
But it's long. It's not though. This is like 8 hours. But the problem is, if you go any more expensive, it becomes 15. It becomes $4,000 more expensive. So I'll check. I'll do more research and the ones I got are about $10,000. Just over. Accommodation. I looked at civil accommodation. Like it's not that. Where are you going to, Marika? We're supposed hopefully look. There's still a lot of supposed happening. But we were supposed to go to Lebanon. Maar dit is ook moeilijk om die visas te kry. So nou kan ons doen na die kamp daar toe met die Syrian grense oor. So ons die visas nie kry visa op die lughawe. So we're going to go in on tours. Are you also going? Ja, met jou paspoort ook uitskort. Wat is er aan met jou paspoort?
South African public. And we commit ourselves to doing just that. We're very aware of the fact that confidence and trust doesn't get handed to one on a platter. It is something that one has to earn and something that one has to sustain over a period of time. Our focus in the coming months will be to do, amongst other things, the following diligently. Firstly, we will stay the course of sound fiscal management. Our expenditure ceiling is sacrosanct. We can have extra expenditure only if we raise extra revenue. We will unreservedly continue our fiscal consolidation process, and we will stabilize our debt in the medium term. If needs be, we will accelerate this by either cutting spending or making selective changes to tax policy. Similarly, any revenue-raising opportunity will be considered very carefully to ensure that it does not damage growth or affect the poor negatively. In this regard, I want to be very clear. As a government, we will not cut pro-poor programs, growth-inducing programs, and investment in the economy. Instead, we will seek to increase investment by the 2017 budget. We are going to redouble our efforts to ensure efficiency of expenditure across the public service. New measures are being put in place to contribute to reducing corruption and enhancing transparency, and these will be complemented by stern enforcement by the relevant agencies. We have been clear that one of the risks of our fiscal framework is the financial state of state-owned entities or companies. Let me emphasize that any support to these companies will be done in a fiscally sustainable manner. As President Zuma said, and I quote, "No state-owned entity will dictate to government how it should be assisted, and nothing will be done that runs contrary to the fiscal prudence that our country is renowned for." Close quote. While many are in a strong financial position, that's these SOEs or SOCs, the performance of others has weakened. Work has therefore begun to develop a uniform legislative framework to regulate state-owned companies. We cannot avoid the necessity of wide-ranging reforms that will put them on a sustainable financial footing and where good governance is non-negotiable. Government is committed to strengthening the link between policy formulation, budgeting, implementation, and the monitoring of performance. I know it is time to break for Christmas and the New Year, but some of us have work to do to make sure that 2016 is much better than 2015. Let us do so and get down to business in a cooperative and collaborative way. Thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you as the Minister of Finance. Thank you very much.
Now, that was lifted off the briefing just a few moments ago, the reappointed Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan, addressing journalists moments ago in Pretoria. Now, the markets reacted very positively this morning after the announcement that Pravin Gordhan is back as Finance Minister. Nompu is at the JSE. Perhaps she could tell us how the markets are reacting at the moment. Nompu.
Thanks very much, Devon. Well, yes, the markets did respond positively. We saw equity